Right, so we've reached that part of the FIFA life cycle, haven't we, guys? It's the end of Team of the Season, there's nothing to do. People have started talking about FC26, but there's not much hype for it, and it seems to happen every year, but everyone's saying they're not going to buy it anymore. It's looking boring, FIFA's dead. But every year, we end up buying it anyway, don't we? Be honest with yourself, look at the camera right now, okay? Look at me. You said you're not going to buy FIFA year after year and then bought it again, because I'm guilty of the same thing, okay? But how do EA do it? I'll tell you how they do it. They talk about new features that are going to change the game. They introduce one or two things that will be game-changing. They're going to be revolutionary. They're going to change everything and make the game so much better and so much more enjoyable. A lot of the time, it's something tiny that you don't even end up playing or don't end up using. But every now and again, EA get it right and they add something that is actually really fun and really interesting and makes the game better. So we're going to go all the way back to FIFA 2004 and we're going to talk about the best feature that every new FIFA since then has added. So before we get up to the new features in every FIFA, you might be wondering why I started with FIFA 2004 specifically, and I think we need a bit of a history lesson before that. It won't take very long. All that I need to tell you is since FIFA International Soccer first released in 1994, not much changed for the first about 10 years. FIFA 96 was the first one that had actual players and actual teams in it outside of the national teams. Around that kind of time as well, where they did do the first 3D football game, because believe it or not, the first few games were 2D, and it was just certain player animations that would come up on the screen. The actual player wasn't moving around, if that kind of makes sense. There'll be some footage here. And then 2001 was kind of the other big change. That was online for the first time, but that was only for the PC and not for console, and not many people played it on PC, so no one really noticed. But when we get to FIFA 2004, this is when it gets way more exciting. All you've been able to do so far was play classic kind of like 1v1 matches or you against the computer, just in a kind of casual kickoff style, which you can still do today, but no one really does. Of course, if you were on PC, there was the same option online for a few years. On top of that, the only other thing you could really do was tournament mode. So that was just entering maybe the FA Cup or the League Cup or the Copa del Rey, something like that, as one of the teams and trying to win it, but it was pretty basic. All you could do was manage your team and play the games, nothing else. And from that last point, I think you might have gathered what was coming in this game. I thought this would have come way, way earlier, but FIFA 2004 was the first ever time that we saw career mode. And it was very different to how it is today. It was nowhere near as fleshed out, of course. It was kind of the first time they were trying it, but it did have a lot of the things that are cornerstones of career mode. There was bold objectives from the very, very first game. I believe they were removed for a while and came back, which is something I'm going to end up saying a lot in this video for different things. There was a transfer budget. Of course, players cost a lot less back then. If you were with one of the top clubs, you might get maybe 45 million, but you'd be able to sign some really good stars with that. And on top of that as well, there was a kind of extra points-based system. It was called like loyalty points or club points or honour points or something like that. I can't remember the exact name. But this was kind of how much pull your club had. Basically, if you went for a really, really high player, really, really good player, you didn't just have to have the money. You had to have the pull and kind of those points to bring a player in as well, which isn't a bad idea. You'll see a lot nowadays on FIFA. You'll see top players from top clubs that are playing Champions League football and they might be winning leagues or whatever, dropping down and joining like a team that's 16th placed in the Serie A or especially the Premier League because they've got quite a lot of money, which wouldn't really happen in real life unless like astronomical wages were offered. So I think this is a really good feature actually, and I kind of like the idea that your team has to have a certain reputation. The only thing they have similar nowadays is that you can't sign players above a certain rating if you're in a lower league. So if you're in the Championship, players you sign have to be under 80 rated if you're playing on strict negotiations and stuff like that. But I think that's a great system. For a lot of these years, there was more than one brilliant feature, so we will have some honourable mentions as well. FIFA 2004 also saw the first time that you could play online on a console. It was only on PlayStation 2, not on the original PlayStation or the Xbox, but it was a big moment and it's kind of led up to what we've got today. So FIFA 2004, you might have never heard of it, never played it, but you've got to respect what it did. So moving on to FIFA 2005. And this is where career mode really started growing into what it is today. This was the first time that you could play the classic 15 seasons. I've never reached that many seasons. Let me know if you have down below. A special thing about this career mode that was really interesting is that you had to start with a lower league team. You couldn't jump straight in and manage Real Madrid or Manchester United or Liverpool. You had to start off in a lower division, and then if you did well, you'd earn a reputation and you'd be able to maybe sign for a bigger club later on. Another new feature is the FIFA shop, and this might sound completely new to you guys, but it's very, very similar when you read it to something that we had during the mid-2010s. The FIFA shop is a place where the player can trade points that they've earned in many ways, from simple objective tasks like having a look at the jukebox or obtaining 10 victories in a row. They can then trade these points for items such as third kits and classic kits, additional music, more footballs, and to play in stadiums at night. If you've only played the last few FIFAs, you won't know what I'm referring to as the kind of similar feature here, but this is kind of the forerunner to the EASFC catalogue, and we're going to get on to talking about that a little bit more later, but it's really fascinating to see that this was introduced, the original concept, about 8 or 9 years before we properly saw it. FIFA 2006 wasn't one that was really big for new features, but there is a few that we will talk about in here. The first one is that it was the birth of maybe the most hated team in Kickoff. It's the team that your little brother or sister would use when you played against them. They introduced Classic 11, and it was very different looking to the Classic 11. Of course, it was added back recently, but the Classic 11 that we have come to know, and a lot of us have come to love, and even more of us have come to hate. This team had some of the classic players in it we've got used to, but not all of them, okay? It had Thomas Ravelli in goal. Baresi and Beckenbauer, of course, were a staple of Classic 11 for many years. Carlos Alberto was in there, but there's also players that I personally haven't heard of. I'm sorry if I've got bad ball knowledge, like Armaro from Spain was one of the midfielders, but he played as a left-back. Boniek from Poland, of course, was in there. The player that for me was the face of Classic 11 was Zico. Of course, he was in there. We had Hadji as well, Eric Cantona, Hugo Sanchez, and Rudi Voller. Of course, a lot of them are either heroes or icons in Ultimate Team now. The bench, though, has a lot of players that perhaps have been forgotten about or haven't been heard of as much. We've got Winston Rufer from New Zealand in goal. Obede Pele, who's, of course, a hero now. We've got Andreas Bremer, who was an icon but was removed. We've got Jacinto Facchetti, who I've never heard of. I'm sorry if you're a fan of whoever he played for. Jean-Pierre Papin is, of course, back now. We've got Leonardo, who was a midfielder from Brazil. Marius Trezor, who was a French defender. Gianni Rivera, who played in midfield for Italy, Ronald Koeman, and then Austrian forward Hans Krankel. FIFA 2006 didn't really add too much else, but there was some interesting features. On the road to the World Cup version of the game only, we had our first ever practice arena. Rather than it being 1v1, your whole team would just try and score against the goalkeeper. I think it is better since they changed it to the classic version of one-on-one versus the goalie. And sponsorship was added to career mode, and it wasn't just made up firms for sponsorship. You could get sponsored by real world organisations and brands, and this is still really, really bizarre to me these days. I'd love them to bring this back. Player career mode and for manager career mode. It could even maybe work in pro clubs as a way that you end up getting more fans or more resources for pro clubs. It'd be really interesting, especially if open world does come in. Maybe they can integrate this like Gatorade and things like that are integrated into NBA 2K. It'd be really fascinating, but this is EA we're talking about, so I can't really see it happening. Now, moving on to FIFA 07, and this had one of the most interesting things that I think you're going to hear in this video. I had no idea that this existed, and I don't think many of you, even if you were around at this time, would know about this. FIFA 07 has something called online leagues, and you might be thinking, oh, we've got that all the time, we've got divisions and all that. This was not divisions in the classic sense. This wasn't like the divisions that KSI would go up in Road to Division 1. This would work with you representing the actual team that you supported, and this is a brilliant idea. I really hope they bring this back. You'd pick your favourite team as you do at the start of FIFA now, but what happens after that is every week, so say you picked a Premier League team, I'd pick West Ham because I support them. Whichever team that West Ham are playing against in real life, you'd get matched in that mode against players from the team that you're playing against. So if we perhaps played Everton, I'd get matched against an Everton fan, and other Everton fans would get matched against other West Ham fans. And whichever club had fans get more victories would get the 3 points in the table. And at the end of the year, there would be a table, which I think is such a fascinating concept. I'd love for them to bring this back, but I don't think it'll ever happen. It's a brilliant idea, though. It's really creative. FIFA 07 did have some other interesting things. It was the first time that you could check individual player performances in the menus after the game, so that's when they will have a rating out of 10. Of course, that's expanded a lot now. You could check every player's XG and things like that, but I believe back then it was just like their pass accuracy, their shot accuracy, of course, their goals and assists and that kind of thing. The Youth Academy, one of my favourite things in career mode, and not in a weird way, was added then. It's the best way, and it has been for a long time, to get some players. There's nothing like having a homegrown player comes into the squad at 16, takes the world by storm and becomes a club legend. There is nothing like it. They also added something in FIFA 07 called Create a Club, where instead of picking one of the teams that already exists, you can create your own club with its own badge, its own stadium, its own identity, and all of that. I've just checked my notes, guys. I'm not reading the FIFA 22 notes by accident. We'll get onto that later. Moving on to FIFA 08, and it's another feature here that I thought had been around way longer than it actually has. I thought this would have been around literally since the game started. For the first 14 years of FIFA, up until FIFA 08, you could not control a single player on their own on the pitch. Be a Pro was added for the first time as recently as 2008. The way this worked is that you would go either into a single match, of course, as you could with anything else, or you would go into a season. You could not play player career mode on FIFA 08. I believe it could be a custom player, or of course, as you can now, you can pick a real life player, but there was nothing else to it. It was literally just you controlled a player, you play the games, that was it. Some other honourable mentions from FIFA 2008 are right stick switching was added for the first time. Thank God, I can't imagine how painful it was doing it before this. Online co-op was added for the first time, where you could play on the same team as one of your teammates. This is not the same as co-op seasons, we'll get onto it later. And you could create your own custom tournaments using any league, any players, any teams, and chuck them into either a group stage, a league, or a knockout tournament. I again assume that would have been added a lot earlier. FIFA 09 is surely the single most influential FIFA of all time. FIFA 09 made the game that a lot of you grew up with and have enjoyed. Without this game, without the features added to it, FIFA would be completely different. Firstly, FIFA 09 added pro clubs. It sounds so strange to say that pro clubs has been around that long. It was very, very basic, but it had a charm to it. All of you and your mates controlling one player made up by you on the same pitch, especially in those early years. I know the gameplay's bad now, but the gameplay back then, how arcadey and jerky and stupid it was back then, it just sounds like the funniest thing ever. I didn't get into clubs until FIFA 14 or FIFA 15, but playing it on these early games just sounds amazing. There wasn't too much you could do. There was player customization. There was the division system that has stayed very, very consistent since FIFA 09, and that was about it, really. A big shout out to Derrida. I'm sure a lot of you have got great memories of him, and everyone's going to hate me for saying that this was an honourable mention. As a DLC, Ultimate Team was added for the very first time back in FIFA 09. This was based on a sticker book mode that was single player that EA had tried out for their Champions League game, so you could even say that Ultimate Team goes all the way back to about 2006. You can see from the footage here, it looks really, really different for today. Everything worked differently. Chemistry worked different. There was no divisions. Of course, there was no weekend league, no SBCs, no daily knockout tournaments. There was just the market, and you could play single player matches and earn coins. But of course, this is EA, so packs were there from the start. And the main thing I haven't even mentioned yet, on top of having to deal with that, is that Ultimate Team wasn't free. It came out in about February of 2009, and you had to pay for it. It was about £5, I believe, at the time, and that was probably a little bit more acceptable back then. The game itself didn't cost too much. It was around about £40 or £50, of course. I assume it was a little bit more in dollars and euros. But I just really hope EA do never have this idea to bring paid Ultimate Team back. I'm sure everyone would kick off, but they'd try it anyway, wouldn't they? So let's just hope that EA don't come across this video and get any ideas about what they used to do. So moving on to FIFA 10, and Ultimate Team was still a DLC at this point, and it was still paid for, but they did make a few big changes. The beautiful traditional chemistry system came in for the first time. As you saw when I was showing you FIFA 09's Ultimate Team a minute ago, the chemistry was very, very different. They only linked up to players that were in kind of the same area of the pitch, the same third of the pitch as them. But this gave rise to the beautiful, beautiful hybrid teams that we saw for many, many years. And of course, the perfect link. It was brilliant, and I'm sure they'd never, ever change something so perfect. Another thing we need to talk about with FIFA 10 was the custom set pieces. Why don't these exist now? They look so fun. You could go onto a practice pitch, and it wasn't just like drawing lines or anything. You could record every player's movement and where you wanted them to go from a set piece. I've got a feeling we're going to see this added back soon because there's more focus on set pieces than ever. I personally think this should only be added to career, because you imagine adding this to foot, everyone would abuse it, and they'd definitely find something broken where you score a header every single time, like the overhead kicks this year. And maybe the same in clubs. I'm not sure about clubs, but I feel like the AR will just ignore what you tell them to do anyway, so maybe add them to clubs, it would be quite funny. On to the first FIFA that I ever played now, FIFA 11, and this led to the absolute explosion of player base in foot. FIFA Ultimate Team was free for the very first time. They also added the Creation Centre this year, and of course, A lot of us won't know what this is, but I really think this should come back, especially with the new face sculpt and the really kind of in-depth design and personalization you can do, especially in career mode and pro clubs with your players. Creation Center let you make custom teams, custom badges, custom players that you could add to clubs, and then your friends, other people could download these and then use them in their game. You did have to do it online, I believe. You did have to have a PC that kind of worked with it. It's a really good idea, and it's something that I'd love them to bring back, but I feel like with kind of people making inappropriate stuff and all of that kind of thing, I don't think EA would really want to, but they should. They absolutely should. If you are an EA employee and you are watching this video, bring back the Creation Center. Another important thing that made more people play foot this year as well was the introduction of special cards. The first few years didn't have them at all, but the Team of the Week, the Team of the Year, and the Team of the Season, I believe, were all added in this one. It's a bit ropey if there was a Team of the Year or Team of the Season, because all special cards had the Team of the Week design. They all had the classic black and gold design, but apparently there was Team of the Years. Apparently they were just hyper boosted informs, but I'm not too sure about this. If you used to play back then, let me know. And there was one more big change that became more influential over the years in FIFA 11 and kind of made the game even more interactive and more accessible, was the web app. Not the companion, but the web app for the first time was available on FIFA 11, and that hasn't really changed too much between then and now. Moving on to FIFA 12, and this was nowhere near as innovative as the year before. It was the first time, though, that Ultimate Team was included on launch, and EA did really push that as a new feature, but it doesn't really change much. It was free the year before, it's just you got to play it a month earlier. There was Deadline Day on Career Mode, which is, of course, brilliant. We love Deadline Day. Before that, it would just go as a normal day. I do think in recent years it does need a bit of tweaking. Why does no one bid for your players until there's an hour left and you can't sign replacements? And on top of that as well, it seems to have got even worse in the last few years, and you get loads of bids coming through, especially for loans, after the window's shut. But that was it for FIFA 12. There was a few quality of life changes, but not really much. FIFA 13, which was when the YouTube scene really started growing. We had the companion app come for the very first time there, the mobile app, of course, to complement the web app, and that just makes it a bit easier to manage your team as well. We had the iconic introduction to career mode of Alan McInally and Jeff Shreves. I'm sure you can all hear some of their lines playing in your head right now.
Cheers, Jeff.
And we had the EA SFC catalogue, where you could complete objectives, you could get loan players, you could get third kits, you could get classic kits to use, you could get extra space on your transfer list, you could get coin boost where you might get an extra 1k coins per game, and you could get celebrations as well. This seems suspiciously similar to my notes for FIFA 07. On top of that as well, they added seasons to FUT, and before that there was tournaments, there was online single matches, there was like the Gold Cup and stuff like that. But there wasn't proper seasons. There was online seasons and offline seasons for those who didn't want to really play with others or weren't as good and wanted to learn the game but still play Ultimate Team. A kind of quick overview for those of you that don't know how classic seasons work. I know it worries me, there's people out there that are that young. But you'd play 10 games and you'd have to hit a certain amount of points to stay in the division or you'd get relegated. There'd be a amount of points in the middle where it'd be kind of a hold, you just hold your division, nothing happens. There'd be promotion and then there'd be the title, and in Division 1 I believe it was 27 points for the title, so you had to win 9 games out of 10. It sounds like hell. It sounds worse than trying to get Elite Weekend League, and trust me, it was. Moving on to FIFA 14, and this was a special game. There's so many things that I could have picked for the best new features here, but I went with the OG FIFA 14 Brazil World Cup mode. It's the first time we'd seen the proper World Cup mode in Ultimate Team, and boy was it fun. Normally the game dies after Team of the Season, okay, but here they let you play a special World Cup mode, and how World Cup mode worked then, and I believe it was the same for Russia 2018, was you could only get cards in packs. There was no markets, and chemistry was a bit different as well. So if I had a Spanish player, an English player, and a French player, they'd all get a orange link to each other, which would be very, very useful. And it was really interesting and really different. I'm not really giving you much insight here. I'm just reminiscing and enjoying it. You can see what's going on the screen. What a mode. Let me know your best memories of the World Cup modes. This was also the first time we got icons, or back then they were called legends, and they were very, very different to the ones you have today. They got one version throughout the entire year, and they stuck to it, because these players in their one version were so rare and so difficult to get, and so good that you never needed a different version of them. You never needed a 94 or a 96 Hullet, because 90 Hullet was the best player in the game, and he was the only one, I believe, in the Hullet gang that time, which, for those of you that don't know, because every player has it now, is when all of the stats, all of the face stats on a player were 80 or above. If anyone had one icon in their team, you were terrified. They were probably going to smack you. On top of that, we had chem styles for the very first time. I'm surprised it took so long for these to come around. They actually used to be really useful. I know they're not now. Hunters and Shadows used to go for around 5k each. And I think the Penfez sums up how OP chem styles used to be better than anyone else. If you never heard him say before that if you put a shadow on him, he's basically an icon. Have you ever watched the Penfez? A little feature, but one that will always be close to my heart, is the goated menu layout that was used, I believe, between this one and about FIFA 19. Bring it back, please. On to FIFA 15, and I'm sure a lot of you watching this will have this as your favourite FIFA, or if not your favourite, the most nostalgic or the most enjoyable. It's got to be up there for everyone, surely. And FIFA 15 did have some really interesting additions, and one that goes under the radar that for me was the biggest addition was player instructions were added for the first time. Before this, there was still custom tactics, but you couldn't tell individual players to do stuff. All you could do was put down what style of play you wanted to do, and then the width and the depth of your team. That was literally all you could do. And it's no surprise and no coincidence that the first year that you could put your strikers on getting behind, stay forward, was also the year that Dumbia, Javinho, and Ibarbo terrorised literally everyone. I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes. Apart from player instructions though, there wasn't too many changes. A big one was that physical became one of the main 6 face stats. Before that, physical was not on players' cards. It would be heading instead of physical, and I think physical is a much better one. Concept players were also added for the first time, and with kind of foot head, foot bin, foot whiz, whatever you use now, you might wonder why this was a thing, but back then they didn't exist apart from, I think, foot head. Concept players were really, really helpful for squad building, and they still are. I do think they're a bit underutilised because of the apps now, but they're still great. Moving on to FIFA 16, another one that was really enjoyable. I don't think it was as good as the 2 previous, but it was still a great game. Surely, the biggest thing added to FIFA 16 has got to be the draft. YouTubers loved it. YouTubers milked this for content for so long, and a few of them still do. But nothing will beat the absolute limbs of watching Road to Shore get a 194 or even like a 195 for the first time. I still remember where I was on that day. It gave you a chance to, of course, use a lot of players that you would never used before. That was kind of the main appeal of it. Apart from the packs and the rewards, which have never been that good, was that you get to try out these top tier players. And for those of us that didn't have millions and millions of coins, even at this point, it was really hard to get your hands on a Messi, a Ronaldo, or even some of the better informs, and of course Team of the Seasons and Team of the Years. Every account did come with a free draft token, so me and all my friends used to make a new FIFA account or a new PSN account literally every day so we could keep playing free drafts. Apart from that, it was really quality of life changes for FIFA 16, but they did do quite a few things that made the game a lot easier. Player swap was added for the first time, which made the menus and changing your squad around a lot quicker. Dynamic images were added, I believe, for Team of the Season, and there's been a lot of iconic ones over the years, and as you know, and as you would have heard about a lot over the last few years, having a really iconic dynamic image can add maybe like 100k to the value of a player, especially if it's them holding a trophy. Another nice one was that icons got chemistry to all players. They got an orange link at least to everyone. Before that, icons only linked to each other or players of the same nation, which kind of ruined trying to use them. You had to build your whole team around an icon, and people would because they were so rare and so OP and so good. It just made them a lot easier, and they could still fit into any team you wanted. You wouldn't have to sell your whole team just because you packed a kind of mid-tier icon. I did say earlier that FIFA 09 laid down the groundwork for FIFA as we have it today, but I don't think modern FIFA and FIFA in the last few years would look anywhere similar to how it does today without FIFA 17. A lot of the things that especially kind of new players have come to love came from this game, and there is so many things to pick from. We've got a long honourable mentions list, but for me, there's only one choice. You're on the It's Cabo channel, so it has to be SBCs. So adding SBCs gave the chance to, of course, get packs and the chance to get better players, and it added value. So a lot of players that perhaps weren't that good. If you had Alessandrini when he wasn't a good player because he was LA Galaxy, so he was MLS and he was French, he was a unique league and nation, so he was super helpful for SBCs going for 5k. Back then as well, trading, of course, on top of that for SBCs was brilliant. And I'm just going to give a special shout out to the league cards for SBCs. They were brilliant, although I do hate that Lacazette with a passion. Honourable mentions. Weekend League is kind of an honourable mention. I don't like the Weekend League personally. I think it's kind of killed off casual FIFA. You can't really play Ultimate Team casually anymore because of Weekend League. But I'm just going to remind you, it used to be even more sweaty and even more disgusting than it is now. You used to have to play the Daily Knockout Tournament, which was not the same as it is now. It wasn't getting, I think, 3 wins out of 5 or 6 or whatever it is now. You used to have to play a quarter-final, a semi-final, and a final. There may even have been a round of 16 at some point, and you had to win that to get into the Weekend League. And after that, you then had to play 40 games, 4-0, 40 games, and I think now it might be 15 or 20. That is at least 10 hours, and that's before the ball goes out of play at all. That's before any loading times. That's before people pause in to make subs. If you wanted to get a good rank in Weekend League, that is about 16 hours. That's probably 2 days of your life. That's probably all you do for the whole weekend. But the rewards were worth it at the time. Monthly rewards, the red players you'd get a guaranteed icon. It was amazing. That's still back when promo cards and informs held a lot of value. So it was so hyped. You get so many views if you were a pro FIFA player opening your monthly rewards. And I know I've talked about FIFA 17 for a long time now, but we can't forget the journey. The first time round, I did really enjoy the journey. I think I played through it maybe like twice so I could make some different decisions and stuff. And it also had maybe the coldest betrayal of all time. Gareth Walker still lives rent-free in my head. I hate him with a passion. Right, I think we should move on to FIFA 18 before I crash out over Gareth Walker. And FIFA 18 was the first time that we had icons as they're known today. Before that, as I said, they were legends. And with icons, they changed the name because they were going to be on all consoles. This was also when they added icon stories for the first time now. And that phrase itself may not make sense to a lot of you, but what icon stories was there being more than one version of the same icon. This was the birth of baby icon, mid icon, prime icon. This also had icon SBCs, so kind of the lower tier icons, your Alan Shearers and the like, no disrespect to him, you would be able to get for an SBC. If you were an average player who just kind of played the game normally, you could scrape the players together to get a special icon card in your team, and that was really exciting that they were attainable, but they were still rare enough, and it was still really exciting when you got one. It was still kind of an achievement to have an icon in your team. On top of this, they added everyone's favourite mode, squad battles, and they added the cutscenes to career mode. So back then it wasn't as many as it is now, but they were all around the transfer negotiations. So that was the first time where the managers would sit in the office and you'd discuss a fee with them. Before that, you'd just sign a bit of paper and send it off to them. So this was the birth of, I feel like I've wasted my trip here. What a derisory offer for my player. We will not be talking to you anymore when you've bid literally the market price for the player. So, on we go to FIFA 19, and this is probably the last major change that we had to shape modern FIFA, and that is division rivals. I talked earlier about kind of how the division system works in the first place and how hype it was for everyone, but by the time we got to FIFA 19, people were a little bit bored of it. There was a massive gap in teams between people that could play FUT Champs and were good enough and weren't, and of course it's fair that better people have better teams, but it was creating a gap that was far, far too big. And division rivals added a chance for players to get weekly rewards. It made the game a lot more engaging, meant a lot more people would perhaps jump on the game a bit more. And these were, of course, a lot more attainable than weekend league rewards. You could play all week and you had to play far less games than you would for the rewards that you'd get from the weekend league. Back then, it was done by skill rating for your division. So if you fell between a certain skill rating, you'd be placed in a certain division. And similar to now, the rewards would get better the higher up the divisions you went. There was a bit of a problem with this though. People would drop sometimes just to get easy wins when they couldn't be bothered. It became a lot more of a problem from FIFA 20 onwards with especially icon swaps, but objectives in general, where people would drop to lower divisions, and it ended up with Division 6 and Division 7 being hard and then Div 3 and Div 4 at some point. The honourable mention here is going to be timed finishing, and we literally haven't talked about gameplay mechanics at all so far, and that tells you enough about FIFA, doesn't it? It wasn't very skillful at the time. It's become a lot more balanced, and it's become a great feature since, and I do use it a lot more now than I used to. I think it's a little bit easier now, but timed finesses used to be absolutely abused back in the day. They literally gave your player Finesse Plus before Finesse Plus was a thing. Well, they did eventually nerf timed finishing because they thought that perhaps it was a little bit unskilled, so they replaced it with the far more skillful and a far more difficult El Tornado cross into an overhead kick / header. FIFA 20 comes next, and of course this is the first of the lockdown FIFAs, and this was when Fortnite was probably at its peak, and FIFA were worried. They had the battle pass that was making them so much money, it was bringing people back to Fortnite every single day, and they needed to do something. So FIFA 20 saw the rise of objectives and the season pass, and of course up until the end of this year it's always been free, and I think that's been a great thing. It's a real shame it's changing. Always gave you some extra things to do, maybe made you use a certain team, and there was icon swaps on top of that as well, which again, icons were still rare at this point, but it was another thing that made them kind of the right level of attainability. Even back then, the rewards were better, I think, from the season pass. The players were always usable, you'd always see the storyline players in people's teams, and now they just give you too many packs and it's flooded the market and kind of ruined the game, but I'll make a different video about that another time. Another thing that is a bit of an honourable mention for this game, I see so many people on socials getting nostalgic about the FIFA 20 free kicks, and then you put spin on it with a right stick and maybe change the run up with a right stick. I wasn't a massive fan apart from knuckleballs. They were harder, which I think was good. Free kicks are too easy now. But it was so satisfying to score a knuckleball. Apart from that, though, when you were trying to do a cold free kick, it didn't really work too well, in my opinion. But I know people loved them. Can you imagine this free kick mechanic on a player that had dead ball plus? It would be absolute carnage. So moving on to FIFA 21, which was another FIFA where not really much changed. I know people will joke and say that's every FIFA and nothing ever changes, but FIFA 21 was really one of them where not much changed, especially for Ultimate Team, which is I know what a lot of you are interested in. And the career mode community are very dedicated, as I'm sure many of you will know, and they've been pushing for changes for a long time, and there is enough of them, and it is enough of the community that exclusively play career mode that EA felt they had to change stuff to stop them not buying the game. And their response to this was the interactive match sim. And I do think this was a great change because before you had to quick sim or play the game and you had no control once the game had started if you quick simmed. You'd end up losing loads of games to random teams. You start your first team in the FA Cup and lose to Accrington Stanley. Moving on to FIFA 22, they added Creator Club. Seems familiar. We're not going to talk about that, we talked about it earlier, and they added heroes, which I think were a great idea at the time, but now there's far too many of them. There was only a few per league. Now the Premier League's got a stupid amount of heroes, so do a few of the other leagues. They were a great idea at the time, and I think they would have worked a lot better in the older games when people couldn't get icons and they were unattainable back in like FIFA 14 to about 18. Maybe having heroes there as players that were still really good, but people could get quite a bit easier, would have been a great idea. I feel like they're just a bit pointless now, and they're just another card in the massive sea of promo cards. I've said a few times not much has changed. I don't think anything has changed less than FIFA 23 and FIFA 22. I remember playing FIFA 23, reacting to it when it came out, and there was the trailers and everything, playing it, streaming it, the lot, okay? About the only useful thing they added was crossplay, nothing else. So now we move on to the FC era. We move on to FIFA being no more. And EA are under pressure, aren't they? They were under pressure last year to create a good game. And I'll be honest, I think they've ruined it twice in a row and it's got worse. But there was a few highlights in there, a few things that maybe kept us coming back to the game. For FC 24, there is no question about it. Evolutions were the best new feature added. Last year, I don't think they were perfect. They were behind the power curve quite a lot. And they've been fine-tuned this year with the addition of the maximum stats, the stat limits. Players fit into a lot more Evos, and Evo players are a lot more usable in your team. So I think they're really good this year. Last year, the first year, they perhaps weren't all that, but it was so exciting. Before then, if you were doing a past and present, you really had to support like Man United, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool, and be able to afford icons, or you wouldn't have a great past and present team. Now I can chuck Jordan Hugill up front, and he is going to be class. And finally, the game that we are happily saying goodbye to in the very near future, FC 25. And there is one feature that's kept me playing this game, and that is Rush. I think Rush has absolutely saved FIFA this year. It's been crying out for a casual mode where you can still kind of earn decent rewards, and Rush is exactly that. Foot Rush is so calm and so casual. You end up with some absolute melons on your team sometimes, but it's all part of the fun. If you lose, nothing really happens, so no one really cares too much, and players just seem a lot friendlier and a lot nicer and less sweaty in Rush, which is great. But you still get to EO your players at the same time. You still get Rush points that can then be used for other things, and since they shortened the match length, it's become even more enjoyable, and you can just hop on for 20 minutes, play a bit of Rush, get a bit done, and you're never going to jump off Rush really feeling annoyed as you would with the other mode. So having a casual foot mode that this does still give you rewards, I think has been a brilliant idea. Honourable mentions apart from that as well, we've only got two. The SBC storage, which was about 5 years at least too late. Probably 8 years. It probably could have come out with SBCs themselves in FIFA 17 when untradeable cards really became a thing. And on top of that as well, one more thing. I've only mentioned one thing about playing the actual game and kicking the football around so far, and the second one's going to be professional fouls, just because they're funny. So that's it, guys. That is, in my opinion, the best feature, well, features, because I couldn't keep myself to just one, that have been added to every FIFA game over the last about 20 years. It's a long time, isn't it? There's a few that aren't on here because I didn't like them being added. For example, play styles, for example, FCIQ this year. There'll be others as well. Maybe I should do a video on the worst feature added or things that shouldn't have been removed, the worst changes I've made every year. Let me know about that, and of course, if I missed out on any of your favourites, let me know as well. Thank you so much for watching this, guys. It's taken a lot of research, so if you could like the video, I'd really appreciate that. And if you'd like to watch something similar and a bit longer from me, and you want to hear a lot more about the FIFA lore and kind of history of it, I'm going to link my FIFA Iceberg video in the top right corner, I think it is. It's been a long time since I've done this, so I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. It'll be in the description too. But thank you so much for watching, guys, and hopefully I'll see you soon for another one. Goodbye.